What if I told you that Johnny Depp, yes, the very same Johnny Depp who's brought us some of the most unforgettable characters in film history, has a talent that most people don't even know about? Not something you'd expect. Not a random skill he picked up for a role. But a deep, personal passion that's been with him since he was just a kid. Now, we all think we know Johnny, right? We've seen him as Captain Jack Sparrow, stumbling and smirking his way through danger. We've seen him as Edward Scissorhands, silently breaking our hearts with a single look. We've seen him transform into countless roles, disappearing so completely into his characters that it's easy to forget there's even a real person behind them. But behind all of those transformations, behind the fame, behind the red carpets and interviews, there's a Johnny Depp that most people never see. A Johnny Depp who isn't holding a movie script, isn't on a film set, and isn't surrounded by cameras. A Johnny Depp who's holding a guitar. You see, long before the world knew him as an actor, long before he became one of Hollywood's most mysterious and magnetic figures, Johnny was just a boy in Kentucky with a dream, and that dream had nothing to do with movies. It was all about music. Picture it for a moment. A small bedroom in a modest house. Posters of rock legends cover the walls. Maybe it's the Rolling Stones. Maybe it's Jimi Hendrix. Maybe it's a mix of them all, their faces looking down like silent mentors. There's an old stereo in the corner, stacks of vinyl records piled high. And in the middle of this room, there's Johnny, hair a little messy, completely absorbed in the guitar resting on his lap. He's not just strumming a few chords to pass the time. He's in it. Eyes closed, head tilted, completely lost in the sound. The rest of the world fades away when he plays. By the time he was 12, this wasn't just a hobby, it was an obsession. He would play until his fingertips burned. And even then, he wouldn't stop. He'd push through the pain, chasing that perfect sound, chasing the feeling that music gave him. It wasn't about fame. It wasn't about money. It was about something deeper, that unshakable pull you feel when you found the thing you're meant to do. And for Johnny, that thing was music. As he got older, his commitment only grew. While other kids were thinking about college or planning safe careers, Johnny had one plan: make it in music. He wasn't just practicing alone in his room anymore. He started playing with bands, performing live, feeling that rush of connection when a crowd reacts to your music. And then came the decision that would change everything: he dropped out of school. That's how much he believed in music. He wasn't leaving to chase an easy dream, he was stepping into an uncertain world, driven purely by passion. Most people would call it risky. He called it necessary. It wasn't all glamorous, of course. The early days of being a musician are rarely easy. There are the small gigs in smoky bars, the long nights hauling gear from one venue to another, the uncertainty of whether you'll even get paid. But Johnny didn't care. Every show, no matter how small, was a chance to do what he loved. And here's the thing, he was good. Not good for someone who also acts good. Genuinely good. Good enough to be taken seriously by other musicians. Good enough to land gigs that put him on stage in front of big crowds. Good enough to open for bands people actually knew. Then life threw him a curveball. Acting came into the picture almost by accident. It wasn't part of the plan. In fact, if things had gone differently, there's a chance we might never have known Johnny Depp the actor at all. But once acting found him, everything changed. Suddenly, he was on sets instead of stages, reading scripts instead of set lists. And yet, the music never left. Even as he became one of the most sought-after actors in the world, even when he was filming back-to-back movies, traveling, doing press tours, his guitar was always nearby. Over the years, he's shared the stage with some of the biggest names in music, and when I say big, I mean the kind of legends whose names alone can sell out arenas in minutes. These are the musicians whose albums become part of people's lives, whose songs are passed down through generations, whose tours are global events. And Johnny? He didn't just get a polite guest spot where he strums a few chords while the crowd claps politely because, hey, it's Johnny Depp. No. He got invited into their world because they saw him as one of them. Think about that for a second. In the music industry, credibility isn't something you can buy, and it isn't something that comes just because you're famous in another field. Musicians, especially the great ones, are protective of their craft. They've spent decades honing their skills, sweating on stage night after night, perfecting every note, every solo. If they let you stand next to them under the spotlight, it means they trust you to hold your own. And Johnny earned that trust. When he steps on stage with these icons, there's a shift in the air. The lights dim, the crowd buzzes with anticipation, and then he walks out, guitar in hand, wearing that signature casual but effortless style of his. Maybe it's a worn leather jacket, maybe a hat tilted just enough to cast a shadow over his eyes. He doesn't wave his arms for attention or try to hype the crowd with words. He just plugs in, adjusts the strap on his guitar, and when that first note rings out, you realize why he's there. It's not about showing off. It's not about trying to steal the spotlight. Johnny plays like someone who's there purely for the music. His fingers move across the strings with the ease of someone who's spent thousands of hours practicing. Not for fame, not for a paycheck, but because he can't imagine a life without it. And the sound, it's not just technically good. It's emotional. There's a story in the way he bends a note, in the way he slides between chords, in the pauses he lets hang in the air just long enough to make the audience lean in. The other musicians feel it too. You can see it in the way they glance at him mid-song, that unspoken acknowledgement between players that says, yeah, you've got it. Sometimes, in the middle of a set, one of these legendary guitarists will step back, give him space, and let him take the lead. The crowd watches as Johnny closes his eyes and loses himself in the moment, the notes flowing like a conversation he's been waiting years to have. And here's the thing, the audience responds. Not because it's cool to see an actor playing guitar, but because they're hearing something genuine. They're watching someone who could have easily left this part of himself in the past, who could have just been satisfied with a massively successful acting career, but chose to keep playing, keep growing, keep sharing. That kind of authenticity is rare, and people can feel it. There's something almost poetic about it. On film, Johnny tells stories through his characters, the way he moves, the way he speaks, the way he reacts. On stage, he tells stories without words. Each riff, each solo, each rhythm becomes a piece of him laid bare for the audience to experience. And when the crowd cheers, it's not just for the celebrity they recognize from the big screen, it's for the musician standing in front of them, pouring himself into every note. You have to understand, in the world of live music, there's no safety net. There are no multiple takes like on a movie set. If you miss a note, the whole audience hears it. If you can't keep up, it shows instantly. But Johnny holds his own, night after night, in front of thousands of people who came expecting perfection from the legends beside him. That's the level he's playing at. And maybe that's why the biggest names in rock and blues keep calling him back. Because when he's on stage, he's not there to be the actor who's playing music for fun. He's there as a fellow artist. Someone who's walked his own road, faced his own battles, and still shows up ready to create something real. Someone who understands that music isn't just sound, it's a way to connect, to communicate things you can't say any other way. For Johnny, each performance is a conversation between him, the other musicians, and the audience. Sometimes it's loud and electric, filled with energy and grit. Other times it's soft, almost delicate, with the kind of quiet moments that make you hold your breath so you don't miss a single note. He's not afraid to let the music breathe, to let it take its time. That patience, that ability to trust the song, is something you can't fake. And here's what makes it even more impressive, Johnny could easily use his fame to dominate the moment, to put himself front and center and make the whole thing about him. But he doesn't. He blends in when it's right, steps forward when it's his time, and always, always serves the song above everything else. That humility is part of why these legendary musicians respect him. He's not chasing the spotlight, he's chasing the music. If you've ever seen him live, you know exactly what I mean. You can feel it in the way the crowd reacts, not with polite applause, but with that raw, excited energy that happens when people realize they're witnessing something authentic. And when the set is over, and the last note fades into the air, there's this lingering feeling, like you've just been let in on a secret. You came expecting to see Johnny Depp, the movie star. You left having experienced Johnny Depp, the musician. That's why, year after year, the invitations keep coming. Not because he's a novelty act. Not because it's good publicity. But because, when he's up there with those legends, he belongs. And that, more than anything, is what makes this hidden side of him so incredible. It's not just a talent. It's a calling. And it's not just concerts. His music has this way of weaving itself into his acting career, slipping in quietly, almost unnoticed, but leaving an impact that's hard to measure. Most people have no idea it happens, because it's not something he talks about often. It's one of those deeply personal parts of his process, something that belongs more to the character than to him, and something he does not for recognition, but because it works. When Johnny prepares for a role, it's never just about memorizing lines or figuring out where to stand in a scene. He builds his characters from the inside out. He studies them, learns their quirks, imagines how they see the world. And somewhere in that process, music often comes into play. He'll sit down and start crafting a playlist, carefully choosing songs that match the emotional landscape of that character's life. If the role is dark and brooding, the playlist might be full of moody, slow-burning tracks with heavy bass and haunting vocals. If the character is chaotic and unpredictable, maybe the songs are sharp, fast, and full of strange twists, the kind of music that makes you feel slightly off balance. He's not just picking songs he likes. He's curating a soundtrack for someone who doesn't exist in the real world, but will soon exist in his performance. And these playlists aren't meant for anyone else to hear. They're private. They're part of his toolkit, a way to slip into another person's skin without forcing it. Sometimes he'll listen to them in the morning before going on set, letting the music shift his mood and mindset until he feels like he's no longer himself. Other times, he'll have the playlist on repeat while doing everyday things, cooking, driving, sitting quietly at home, so that the music becomes second nature, something that lives in the background of his mind, just like it would for the character. But there are also moments when the playlists aren't enough. That's when he picks up his guitar. And here's where it gets even more interesting, he doesn't play for the sake of practicing. He plays to discover. Sometimes he'll start strumming without a plan, letting the mood of the role guide his hands. Maybe the chords come out tense and dissonant, or maybe they're soft and lingering. He follows the sound like a thread, seeing where it leads, until a melody starts to form. It might be just a few notes, a small riff, something almost insignificant to anyone else. But to Johnny, it's the heartbeat of the character. These little melodies are never written down in sheet music or turned into full songs. They're more like fragments of thought, emotional sketches. He might hum them under his breath while in costume, or tap them out on a table during a break in filming. And the magic is that no one in the audience ever hears them directly, but they still feel them. Because the music has already done its job, it's shaped the way he moves, the way he speaks, the way he reacts in the moment. For example, imagine a scene where his character is calm on the outside but secretly unraveling on the inside. That inner tension could come from a melody he's been playing for days, a slow, almost mournful pattern that keeps looping in his mind. It subtly influences his body language, making his movements a fraction slower, his gaze a little more distant. You won't hear the notes in the final film, but they're there, hidden in the performance. It works the other way too. If a character is full of life, energy, and charm, Johnny might write a playful, upbeat tune just for himself. Something with a bounce, something that makes him walk a little lighter, talk a little faster. Again, the audience never hears it, but they see it, in the spark in his eyes, in the rhythm of his speech, in the way he seems to be dancing just slightly through the role. Sometimes this process even bleeds into the set itself. He might be in his trailer between takes, guitar in hand, quietly working through one of these private melodies. A crew member might overhear it without realizing it's part of the role's DNA. Other times, if the director is open to it, a snippet of what he's been playing could make its way into the actual film, a subtle layer of authenticity that only a few people on set will understand. This blending of music and acting isn't common, and it's not easy to do well. Most actors rely on traditional techniques to prepare for roles. But for Johnny, music is another language, one he's been fluent in for decades. And because of that, it's a tool he can use to reach emotional places that might otherwise be locked away. It's also a deeply personal thing for him. He's not doing it because it sounds interesting in an interview. In fact, he rarely talks about it publicly. It's part of his private creative space, something he protects, something that belongs to him and the character alone. That secrecy might be why it works so well. There's no pressure to make it perfect for anyone else. It's just about finding the truth of the role. And maybe that's why his performances often feel so layered, so alive. Because they're not just built from lines on a page. They're built from rhythm, from mood, from an invisible soundtrack that only he can hear. It's like each role has its own hidden album, existing somewhere between the strings of his guitar and the spaces in his mind. For the audience, it's an invisible gift. You may never know the song that guided a scene, but you'll feel its presence in the way the scene affects you. You'll feel it in the unspoken weight behind a glance, in the timing of a pause, in the way a character's emotions seem to hum beneath the surface. And that's the beauty of it. Music has always been a part of who Johnny Depp is, and in this quiet, almost secret way, it's been part of his acting all along. It's there in the shadows of his work, shaping it, enriching it, and giving it a depth that you can't quite put into words, but you can sense it, just like you can sense the final note of a song long after it fades. Some of his guitar work has even made it into films. Not as a flashy, credited performance, but as part of the soundtrack, woven quietly into the world of the story. Most people watching have no idea it's him, but it's there. And when you see him live, really playing, it's almost shocking. There's no Jack Sparrow swagger, no quirky Willy Wonka eccentricity. Just Johnny and the music. He plays with a rawness, an intensity, a passion that's impossible to fake. He can walk onto a stage with nothing but a guitar, no costumes, no special effects, and still hold a crowd's attention completely. And that's when you realize, the magnetic presence we've seen on screen isn't limited to acting. It's part of who he is. This hidden talent is a reminder that even the people we think we know often have entire lives, entire identities, that we never see. Johnny Depp isn't just a movie star. He's not just the sum of his famous characters. He's an artist in every sense of the word. A storyteller who uses whatever medium he can, whether it's a film script or 6 strings on a guitar, to share a piece of himself with the world. And maybe that's why everything he does feels so authentic. Because at the core, it's all coming from the same place, the heart of a kid who fell in love with music in a small Kentucky bedroom and never let go. So now that you know this side of Johnny, here's my question: did you already know he was a serious musician, or is this news to you? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you've ever seen him perform live, tell me what it was like, because that's an experience worth sharing. If this story gave you a new appreciation for Johnny Depp, you might want to stick around for my next video. There's another little-known truth about his life that could completely change the way you see him. So hit that like button if you learned something new today. Subscribe for more fascinating stories. And don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss what's coming next, because trust me, there's so much more to Johnny Depp than meets the eye.